Afternoon, everybody. I want to welcome everybody to our Health, Education, Entertainment, Neighborhoods, Parks, Arts, and River Committee. It's a little just past 1. We're in City Hall, room 1060. I'd like to thank my colleague, Councilman Mitchell Farrell, for being here, and I know Councilman Curran Price will be coming to the meeting as well. But this meeting is called to order, and I want to remind those in the audience who want to speak on any of the items on today's agenda or for general public comment to please sign up at the kiosk right outside the door. And Mr. O'Farrell, if you don't mind, we're going to take multiple item public comment as well as general public comment. Do we have any of those? Okay. So we have two individuals, Eric Previn and Corey Schmidt. Corey, why don't you come on up? I'll give you signed up for all the items. I'll give you 3 minutes. 1 item for general public comment and 2 minutes for the items.
Yes. How are you guys doing?
Let's do your items first.
Okay. Let's see. So, okay. I don't have too much to say in regards to the items on the agenda. I think Children's Savings Account Program is a good idea. You know, get people started early. You know, makes things easier. You know, Runyon Canyon and Sylmar. You know, rec centers are great. I want to make sure that our parks, that's something I really push for, is to, well, both keep them clean and to improve them and grow them. There's not enough open space in this city, and it's shrinking. It's constantly shrinking. So, in the senior center, cool with me. So I might want to jump into my public comment. So for my general public comment, I want to just bring up the fact that, you know, this is, neighborhood councils are part of this committee as well, and I am having some issues with the neighborhood council in regards to I'm being up for censure tonight by scrupulous individual coming into our council office saying that I was stealing power when I was helping someone in our safe parking facility trying to clean up her vehicle. I brought it up yesterday, but I just want to bring it to the committee as well to have you guys hear it. Because I don't think it's right, and I think that it illustrates the issues that we have both with homelessness and other problems in the city, is that we talk about doing stuff, and then when you do stuff, you get reprimanded for it, and now I'm, you know, looking at getting removed or censored. So I think that you guys, I want you to take care of this guy, because he is a problem. However you got to do it, I just need you to look into it and take care of the problem, because he runs the whole council. He's got a bunch of puppets. It's kind of a big fiasco that I want to get into, but maybe a more personal level. So,
Thank you, Corey. And you want to do general public comment? 1 minute.
Yeah, sure. I'll go.
Was that it?
I was going to say that was the item, but
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. That's right. Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah.
Corey. Is Penelope?
Yes, Penelope.
Yeah, Penelope. Was that general public comment too?
No, just Eric Previn's a general public.
Okay. Is Eric Previn here? Yeah, I think he signed up everywhere. Yeah. Well, I'm going to call him one more time. Eric Previn, not here. So we'll take him off. And that takes care of general public comment with multiple items. We still got other people signed up for the various items, so we'll call you for that. So that satisfies multiple items and general public comment. Mr. O'Farrell, if you don't mind, I'd like to continue item number 2 and ask the department that were instructed to report back pursuant to the motion that was approved in January to analyze the Dixon study that was commissioned by my office and come back with a report on the feasibility of those recommendations.
No objection.
So moved. And I'm going to take some items out of order. Item number 3, I'm going to call that up first because we have, if we could read that in.
One question, sir.
Yeah.
You mentioned continuing number 2. Was there a motion? No. No. Okay. Just a request for the department.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. Here you go.
Item number 3, motion Rodriguez Lee relative to Department of Recreation and Parks, assessing the vacant building located at the Sylmar Recreation Center to determine the feasibility of converting it into a senior center, and Recreation Parks report on the interim solutions to increase programming and services for seniors at nearby recreational facilities in Sylmar.
And we have one person who signed up, Penelope Mcmillan. come on up. Take your pick.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. I am Penelope Mcmillan, a senior citizen who lives in Sylmar, and I wanted to express my support and appreciation for this motion from Councilwoman Rodriguez to have a vacant building at the Sylmar Recreation Center studied as a possible use for a senior citizen center. I wanted to tell you that Sylmar's senior population is now around 16,000 people, and that is up 28% from what the 2010 census said. The Councilwoman's motion noted that there are 29 senior citizen centers around the city, but that Sylmar remains one of the largest communities geographically not to have one. And I'm told, by the way, that by locals, that this particular building is 100 years old, and it was removed from public use about 5 or 6 years ago due to mold, maybe. And I wanted to say,
No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
I just wanted to say, if it turns out to be unsalvageable, could you please consider use of portables, such as you've done, sir, in the Griffith Park Adult Center uses portables.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And I think Councilmember Rodriguez would love to hear your thoughts on that. And we're very supportive of senior centers. With that said, we're going to move item number 3. Unless Mr. O'Farrell has any problems? Okay, so moved. Then we're going to go to item number, well, seeing no objection, we'll move that, and we'll go to item number 4. If you can read that in.
Item number 4, City Administrative Report relative to the proposed agreement with St. Barnabas Senior Center of Los Angeles to operate the mini multi-purpose senior center at the Los Angeles LGBT Center, Anita Mae Rosenstein campus, located at 1118 North McCandon Place.
Thank you, and we have no public comment on this item. I wanted to quickly state that my office has been working with the LGBT Center and the Department of Aging, and this issue is clearly not settled yet. So I'd like to afford the respective parties some more time to work out any outstanding issues. So I want to recommend that we, 1, receive and file the CAO report, 2, transfer the $450,000 from the Aging Fund number 395-02, account number 5301, back to the portion of the Council Community Projects line item in the General City Proposed Fund number 100-56, entitled Mini Multipurpose Senior Center at the LGBT Center's new Anita Mae Rosenstein campus, for further processing for the same purposes by and through the city clerk. And I want to instruct the Department of Aging to report back to this committee, HENPAR, in 30 days with a status update on ongoing discussions and negotiations. Is that okay? Yeah. Thank you. So that will be the order. Thank you. And I just want to reflect that Councilman Curran Price has joined us as well. So we are going to go to the last item on our agenda, which is the most exciting item, and that's item number 1. If we could read that in.
Sure. The Los Angeles Housing and Community Investment Department report and City Administrative Officer to report relative to the status of the planning and administration in support of a Los Angeles Children's Savings Account program.
Thank you. And if I could have Veronica from HSID and Aaron from Prosperity Now come up to the front of the room. And as they're coming up, I want to give a few brief remarks and kick it over to HSID and Prosperity Now to provide this committee with a quick presentation, and as well as opening up to questions and comments. But colleagues, I am very super excited about this item today in the Children's Savings Account that we're going to discuss, and how CSAs can help our children in our city. Data has shown that a low-income child with a mere $50 in a dedicated savings account is 3 times more likely to enroll in and 4 times more likely to graduate from college than a low-income child with no savings accounts. How is this possible? How is a meager $50 able to triple the likelihood that a low-income child would change his or her life? Well, the difference is simple. The difference is that the conversations that the savings account will start. The difference is made when this idea is planted in the child's mind that, yes, college is for me. The difference is that the dedicated college savings account is for every child in Los Angeles, irrespective of your income, background, or immigration status. And it is an investment in the future, and it's in the worth of that child. This $50 is the seed that will spark this interest and growth. In college, many of you know my story, how I came here to this country with my family when I was 6 years old. We moved into a small apartment in Los Angeles, and got me to where I am today. And I wasn't very different from the friends I grew up with. We were equally underserved, equally disadvantaged, equally poor. But I was lucky. What I did have were parents and a grandmother who made it clear to me that college was mandatory. My parents sacrificed everything to come here, and they made it clear to me that it was my duty to do better than the generations before me. Whether it was at the dinner table, while I was doing my homework, or helping my parents run the cash register at the toy store, we always talked about college, becoming a doctor, and my future. But I had many friends who weren't just as fortunate. Many of my friends did not have parents who themselves went to college, let alone graduate high school, or did they even have parents at all. Those who did have parents or a parent didn't have those dinner table conversations about college or the creation of expectations or opportunities for their children. For too many families and for too many children in Los Angeles, college is not viewed as an option. Too many children are implicitly told that they aren't good enough, rich enough, or worthy enough for a college education. And as a city, we can be that voice that says yes. Yes, you can go to high school. Yes, you can go to college. And yes, you can reach for a bigger and brighter future. We desperately need to be doing this work because 30 years ago, full-time workers with a high school diploma earned 40% less than full-time workers with a bachelor's degree. Today, the difference is 84%. And also in that same time period, the share of jobs that require a post-secondary degree has more than doubled. And today, what's more troubling is that children from high-income families are 8 times more likely to get a bachelor's degree than from those in low-income families. And college enrollment rates in Los Angeles are improving, but we're still well below the national average for California, nationwide. Now, this program will provide a dedicated college savings account to each and every child in LAUSD, starting in the first grade, as well as incentives and matching funds for completing financial literacy and educational programming. And there isn't another school district or school population in this nation that is more deserving of this need. Case in point, did you know that 80% of the students in LAUSD fall under the federal poverty guidelines and are eligible for free or reduced school meals? And that 17% of LAUSD students now are homeless. These kids are exactly who the CSA program, like the one we'll be talking about today, will give much needed a leg up. My office has been working with this initiative for the better part of 4 years with the Office of the Mayor, Supervisors Mark Ridley Thomas, Hilda Solis, LAUSD board members Melvoin, Garcia, and Gomez, and some incredible staff of all of these jurisdictions. What we have before us today isn't the final action this body will need to take, but it establishes the program that gets us incredibly close to the implementation. This is not just an investment in our children. It's an investment in our city's future. With that said, I want to give Veronica and Aaron the floor to make a brief presentation, walk us through the recommendations, and answer any questions that members may have. And I know Abby was supposed to join us, but she got pulled to go into court on behalf of the city today. But I want to mention mention her and recognize her for the incredible work that she's done with my office in moving this program forward, and what an incredible partner HSID has been. So, take it away.
Thank you, Councilmember. Good afternoon, Veronica McDonald with Housing and Community Investment Department. I oversee the Family Source System, and I truly share your same sentiments, Councilmember Ryu. We see every day in the Family Source System where children do not know that what's going to happen to them. They don't know that college is available. And so this is so important. We had a young man recently who visited one of our family source centers, and a story that he shared that really stuck out to me was how he wanted to go to college, but his parents wouldn't file the FAFSA, and he didn't have the savings to go to college. By having this children's savings account program and starting at a young age, we can begin instilling that value of saving. As our youth begin summer jobs, they can invest in themselves as well. And so I thank you for your passion and your commitment and really pushing this forward. And we're very excited to share our progress on the children's savings account program. I'd like to introduce Erin with Prosperity Now. She's been our consultant and really has been so wonderful to work with. Erin.
Thank you so much, Veronica. And I would also like to take the opportunity to thank you, Councilmember Rue, for your leadership on this initiative, and to thank you for sharing your personal story about your journey to college and the impact of those dinner table conversations. It's exactly what Veronica is talking about, and it's exactly what you mentioned yourself, Councilmember Rue. The importance is not saving up tens of thousands of dollars. We know that's a big lift for most families, but really the game changer for CSA programs is the ability to have those conversations and start talking about college from a very young age. So many of you have seen this deck before, and the council member was kind enough to run us through some of the national and LA level data, so we'll move quickly through those pieces, and then we'll talk about the work that we've done in Los Angeles with HSID, and thanks to Abigail Marquez and Veronica's leadership in this, as well as our great partners at the county and city who've been working for years on this. So as the council member mentioned, we know that the number of jobs requiring post-secondary degrees has more than doubled. That will continue to increase as time goes on. One thing that's particularly important is the positive knock-on effects of having a college degree. So we know that over 25% of households with no high school degree are unbanked, which means they don't have access or don't regularly use a checking or savings account. And that number drops to just 1% with households with a college degree. And we see the challenge even more starkly in Los Angeles. So the council member already mentioned our data around students living in poverty in LAUSD, but we also want to recognize that only 32% of Angelenos have a bachelor's degree, and that's as of 2015. And unsurprisingly, nearly 62% of Angelenos live in financial insecurity. And so what that means is families are often one crisis or one emergency away from financial distress and potentially losing their housing. So we know that an increase in college enrollment by just 10% would increase federal, state, and local tax revenue by $580 million annually. There's a huge return on investment. And this is really more than that college degree. We're talking about future earnings, stability, and Angelenos who go to college, whether they stay in LA or go away for college, come back and are productive members of this city. And so what have cities and states begun to do to address this crisis and this issue of college access? So at the federal level, we've seen policies that have increased access to higher education, most notably the GI Bill and Pell Grants, which are a very important part of the college affordability piece, but they're not quite sufficient to move the needle. So a number of cities and states have designed their own college savings account programs, which we're going to now shorthand as CSA, so not to be confused with community supported agriculture, which is probably happening in another commission, another meeting. CSA means Children's Savings Account. So cities and states have launched their own programs to help students build savings, as Veronica mentioned, and instill that expectation that college or post-secondary education is for them. So a few examples of places where these CSA programs have taken off and been extremely successful are places like San Francisco, which started their program back in 2011, followed shortly by Oakland, St. Louis, Boston. There are programs launching now in New York, and I believe there are 65 programs now across the country that have started a CSA program. So we'll get into the details of how the program works, but the headline here is once an account is established, these programs provide all kinds of resources in addition to that savings account, and that includes things like financial education or financial capability services. A lot of CSA programs have partnered with organizations in their own cities like the Family Source Center that Veronica leads on, as well as Center for Financial Empowerment, which has recently launched in the county. So we'll get into all the ways that CSAs can be a through line for organizations. So as I mentioned, CSAs are long-term asset building accounts used for post-secondary expenses. So this is different from a checking or standard savings account. The accounts are restricted for post-secondary use. And I'll say right now that when I say post-secondary or when I say college, I include 2-year, 4-year, in-state, out-of-state, trade school, technical school, vocational training. So when I say college, know that I mean that big long list, and I'm just going to say college to save time. We know that starting a CSA account starting a CSA program in Los Angeles is particularly important because nationally only 3% of families are saving for college, and those that are have a median income of $150,000 or more. So if you're familiar with 529 accounts, we know that the median income is extremely high, and for a lot of reasons which we can get into, is not currently accessible for all LA families. And so exactly what Councilmember mentioned earlier, starting a savings account is really different than a scholarship program because this allows families to feel like they have ownership in the process. And I use a metaphor a lot for CSAs. It's a lot like running a marathon. Your scholarship is the medal that you get for finishing the race, but we know that a lot of kids never sign up to run the race in the first place. And so that's where CSAs come in. It's that entry point that allows families to stay engaged and stay in the game when they know that whether or not they get a scholarship is unknown, and they won't find out for several years into their high school experience. So we've seen successful programs. As I mentioned earlier, the oldest citywide program is in San Francisco. As I said, they began in 2011, and so their oldest kids are now in 9th grade, so they're getting ready to start that college process, but we've seen some early indicators of really strong success. For example, students in their program were 24% more likely to see themselves going to college than the students that were not enrolled in the program that started the year before. And families were 32% more likely to be informed about their financial aid options. And this is really critical because the oldest kids in this program are now in 9th grade, and this data is from several years ago. So these are really young families that are already building their knowledge about what college is and what it takes to get there. So that's really exciting to see. We also know that San Francisco families have saved $2.9 million of their own money, and the city and philanthropy has contributed another $2 million into these accounts. So they're well on their way to saving for college. And the bubble on your right is that students who received an automatic CSA were more likely to save for their children than families who are not automatically enrolled. So that automatic or opt-out enrollment is a really key piece of this program, and we've seen this, we've seen a number of large systems move into this opt-out as a best practice. We see it in retirement, we see it in a number of programs where reducing barriers for families to participate is really key. So what are we trying to accomplish in LA? So a number of folks, many of which are in this room, have been extremely helpful in this collaborative planning process. But what we want to make sure, and what we've been working toward in development, is making sure that we have a program that works for all kids, so that universality that I mentioned earlier. And as the council member mentioned, we're talking about enrolling incoming first graders at LAUSD. And an account that works for all families. So unfortunately, 529s, which are a college savings account vehicle, are not inclusive of the needs of LA families. So for example, you need a social security number, which all of our kids and their parents do not have. You can't make cash deposits, and you need to already have a bank account in order to make contributions. And as well as they recently changed their regulations so you can use your 529 for private K-12 expenses, which would be obviously a non-starter for a city funded program. We want to make sure that we're supporting our students in higher education. So for those reasons and those restrictions, many cities, including San Francisco and St. Louis, have partnered with a bank or credit union to provide traditional savings accounts. So all of those pieces are taken care of. And then the last thing, which was also mentioned earlier, was extra support for students who need it most. So this incentive piece is still in design, and we'll be working with philanthropy to help generate additional funding for this component. But the idea is every kid starts with $50, and students who need it most receive extra boosts, whether that's matching funds for saving deposits, rewarding academic achievement, or participating in financial capability or empowerment programs like the Cash for College programs, like summer youth jobs programs. So that piece is still in development, but HSID will continue to provide updates as those pieces come to fruition. The last thing that I want to end on are 2 points. One, the LA program would be the largest program of its kind in the country, setting more kids on the path to college than any other city in the country. This is an enormous undertaking, so I just want to make sure that we're appreciating the leadership of the city, county, and LAUSD in this endeavor. It's a highly technical process, and there have been some amazing staff who've dedicated a lot of time to making sure that this program is inclusive, accessible, and promotes equity. And I want to end just by reading the first part of this quote. This is from a parent that I actually know very well when I was running the CSA program in St. Louis. And so when her daughter Chase had been in the program for just about 2 years, this is something she said to me at an event. She said, "Erin, I wonder today how different my life would be if I had someone invest in my future and cast a vision for my life as a young child." And that's really what CSA programs are about. Yes, it's about college savings. Yes, it's about being able to afford college, but mostly it's about helping families have a starting place to talk about their future. And when every kid gets $50 and everybody is able to access this account, it makes those types of conversations possible. So that's a lot of information, so I'll stop here for any questions on this presentation, and if there are no questions, I will kick it back to Veronica to walk through the recommendations in the report. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that. Thank you for that great rundown. So let me ask a few questions to set it up, and I'll have my colleagues ask questions as well. So for this program that we're talking about here, or the initial phases, how many students will be selected the first year to participate in the program, and then the second year, the third year, fourth year, and so on? So what's the ramp up?
Yeah, great question. So in the transmittal report, you can find the table on page 14 if you're so inclined to look, but I'm happy to walk through the numbers. So on page 14, let me find it myself. We've worked with LAUSD to get projections for enrollment in first grade. I will caveat this by saying that these are projections, and every year we'll need to revisit and work with the district to identify the actual number of enrolled students. But the plan for the first year is just under 4,000 students, so 3,943 is the projection. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that HSID was awarded a grant from the California Student Aid Commission that would entirely fund that year one cohort's initial $50 deposit. So we'll go through that in a second, but it is fully funded through grant funds right now. And then year 2, 3, 4, and 5, as you can see in the table, year 2 is 25% of LAUSD first graders, which is just over 10,000 students, and scaling up to the 40,687, give or take, going forward in year 5. So the way that this phased rollout would work is all of the students will create a list of selected schools for each year, and then all of the first grade students at, for example, Elm Street Elementary would be enrolled in that year, and that list of schools would continue to expand.
So in year 5, all first graders, all roughly 41,000 first graders will get it, and then obviously the second graders, 30,500 from the previous year would have it, and then for third graders it'll be 20,000, and for I guess fourth graders will be 10,000, and fifth graders will be 4,000.
Correct.
And then obviously in roughly 17 years, every student in LAUSD will have a savings account.
Yes, that's correct.
Great. Do you want to talk about the grant that you just received?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Veronica, please step in if I'm missing any information. But last year, Governor Newsom appropriated $3 million in state funding to support development of local CSA programs. So of that $3 million, HSID was awarded just under $300,000. It's about $286,000, and that for the purposes of seeding the first year of the accounts, as well as dedicating funds for outreach and communication.
Okay, great. So can you walk us through the purpose of the memorandum of agreement between the city, the county, and LAUSD? And in my remarks, I only talked about LAUSD, but we're also going to have LACO involved, right, with the county, with the supervisor's contribution and an interest, right? So if you could walk us through the memorandum of agreement.
Absolutely, yes. LACO has also been involved in the collaborative planning operations with the county and LAUSD. So they've definitely been at the table. So the next step kind of in this process, and Veronica will walk through the recommendations in a minute, are to develop an MOA. So there's further detail in the report, but the MOA will be an agreement that outlines the roles and responsibilities of LAUSD and the county, as well as working on a cost-sharing agreement between the city and the county. Because this is a collaborative process and LAUSD enrolls students not just in the city of LA, but about 20% of LAUSD students are physically located in the county. So the district is kind of a different map than just the city. So that cost-sharing agreement will make sure that all of LAUSD are covered and that there's appropriate cost-sharing between the city and county.
Great. Can you explain the roles and responsibilities of the city, the county, and LAUSD?
Yes, absolutely. So on page 10, there is a table in the report. Go to it real quick. So without getting into too much detail, the primary role of the city in this program is to lead implementation. So the program will be staffed at HSID, and HSID will take the lead in the administration. So that includes things like working with the banking partner and technology partner to open accounts, as well as leading on outreach and engagement. Something that's really great and really unique about a CSA program in Los Angeles, and particularly housing this program at HSID, is the ability to integrate the CSA into the services that already exist, particularly the family source centers. So HSID will take the lead in the management of the program, and the county will be playing a support role. And there's also a unique aspect of the county in that within the DCFS system, the county has additional data that's not part of LAUSD, including youth in foster care and youth that are involved in some of their transitional and other supportive programming. So the idea, especially on that incentive piece, is that the county would play a role in helping identify which students would be eligible for additional incentives. And then obviously LAUSD will be sharing student data and providing a roster each year of new first graders for the program to open accounts for, unless their parent or guardian has opted out. And then the engagement piece will be a partnership between the city and LAUSD, so everything from hosting family savings nights or field trips to the bank or credit union, to doing more standard outreach and engagement activities like tabling at parent-teacher conferences or attending a back-to-school night and providing information to families. Anything that I'm missing there, Veronica?
Great. And can you provide us with a description of the RFP process to select a financial institution and to select a technology provider?
Yeah, I'm going to turn that over to Veronica.
Sure. So we have already drafted an RFP that is included in your transmittal, and we anticipate releasing the RFP somewhere mid to late November, right after it gets approved through City Council. And then what we will do is we'll issue the RFP, we'll have a bidders conference. When the proposals are received sometime in early January, it will be reviewed to make sure that each proposal met the threshold that is identified in the RFP. If it meets its threshold, then it will then be passed to a group of evaluators who will read and rank each proposal, and then we would then make our recommendations to you as far as both the financial institution and technology platform, which in a sense could be both the financial institution and the technology provider, or it could be two separate.
Great. And going back to our previous question, can we also talk about, or can you talk about the fiscal pass-through or the fiscal sponsor, CCF, of this fund?
Yeah.
Describe how that works.
Yeah, sure. So a lot of CSAs in other cities or other jurisdictions have often partnered with a fiscal agent because if you're doing private fundraising, you want to make sure that donors have a tax-deductible place to make those donations. And so the California Community Foundation has been brought up as a possible option. HSID also has fiscal agents that they've worked with in the past. So there are lots of options that are still on the table, but most CSA programs partner with a fiscal agent. One, to provide the tax deduction, and two, from a legal and fiscal operations perspective, clearly designate what are public funds, what are privately raised funds, and what are family contributions.
And I asked that question, colleagues, because if you think about it, when we get to year 5 and we fund all first graders, to about 40,000 first graders, $50, that's roughly about $2 million. So when this program is in full steam, it's going to cost $2 million to basically create all these accounts. But the catch is that $2 million won't be cashed out for another 12 years, right? Because this is a college savings account. They could only draw down these funds when they go to college or post-secondary education. So in 12 years, at $2 million, you have a $24 million pot, which can be invested through an agency like a California Community Foundation who's very much interested and wants to help out. And if this program is able to generate or fundraise a little bit more, with roughly a pot of $24 to $40 million, the interest generated every year could basically fund the next first grade class. Mm-hmm. So this is a program that could actually, of course, there's some admin costs involved, right? But if we raise enough money in this fund for the children's savings accounts, it is a program that is just self-replicating and sustainable on itself. So that's another exciting portion of this. Despite all the financial literacy, of course, kids going to college, and all the other positive impacts of this. So I'm going to open it up to questions to my colleagues. Mr. Price?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, first of all, thanks for your leadership on this. You have been, you literally put your money where your mouth is on this. So we appreciate your leadership and appreciate the team that's come together, the collaborative team that's come together to make this happen. This certainly is something that's very valuable in my district, the area that I represent. About a third of the population is under 18, a third, and we're talking about low income, all the negatives associated with not having the financial wherewithal, and so this is going to be a real important resource. On a personal note, I was the first in my family to graduate from a four-year college. Not the first to go, but the first to graduate, and it was largely because of the encouragement and support I got from my parents and friends. That college was something that I was going to do. It wasn't an option, but you were going to go to college. And I think many households give that message to their kids. But even with that, I didn't have the resources. So like many, I took out student loans. I did work study. Had some scholarship help, but having a pot, a resource, would really make a big difference, will make a big difference. So just a couple of questions. These funds belong to the student? Do they belong to him or her? What happens if he or she doesn't access them because of some health issues, or they move, or they decide not to go to college? What happens to that money?
Yeah, that's a great question. And or if a kid gets a full ride, right?
Or if he doesn't need it.
Yeah, so a more positive spin on what happens if they don't need it. I always like to bring up, kids you can get a full ride. So if the funds are not used, so this is one of the reasons why HSID has stepped up to be the account custodian in this. So all of the public and private funds are owned by the city. And so there's language in this report, or if it's not in this, it's in a council file, previous version of this report. Students have until age 26 to withdraw their funds, and it would only be after that time that the funds would automatically roll back to the city. So we've seen this in every city that has a CSA program. There's a rollback feature. So if a kid, you move, you forget about your savings account, and let's say you moved after 3rd grade and you never came back to LAUSD and you totally forgot that you ever had a CSA. At age 26, any city or any program funds, so that includes city and privately raised funds, would roll right back into that account. So it's more of a record keeping. As the council member stated, these accounts are open for a minimum of 12 years, but there's a rollback procedure by which the city would recapture any funds that were not used.
But the student could claim them. Does he claim them all, or he claim some portion, or what's?
They could claim all. And then if the student, let's say, decides or the family wants to withdraw from the program, they would receive all of the money that they invested in addition to the $50,000. They wouldn't receive the $50,000. That would remain in the custodial account. They would only be able to draw down on any money that they deposited on their own.
So families can add to
Yes,
this
family
fund
can add.
in
Yes,
the name
that's
of
the
their
whole goal.
child.
We want families to add too.
So let's say, just to make this simple, let's give an example. So let's say a student graduates from LAUSD and they have $100 in that CSA account. $50 was that initial contribution from the city, and then grandma made a $50 deposit somewhere along the way. If a student decides not to go to college or they need to withdraw those funds for emergencies, let's say their car breaks down, you need that car to get to work, for example, a family could request the portion that they have contributed, but they would not be able to access that initial $50 or any program provided funds unless they were for an eligible post-secondary purpose.
Would that withdrawal include interest?
Depends on how the account is
Got
structured.
it, okay.
Yeah, so that will be worked out as a part of the RFP process and a part of the agreement with the financial institution.
So that's the exciting part of this program. It's not just for college, but it's for any post-secondary education. And we're envisioning, and it's based on the RFP, at Citibank, well, many banks have done this for a long time. So this account will almost be like a dual account. There's the initial money that we put in, which they cannot touch, but they could see it, hopefully, through an interactive screen where they could see it grow, or they could see this money in there. And then there's a secondary account, which is still one account, where the parents or anybody else could contribute to that account. So it's like any other bank account. Now, why is that important? As the statistics that were shown in the presentation by Aaron, many of these low-income families who don't have high school or college educations don't even bank. They still put money under their pillow. They put money under their mattresses. So for many families, this will be the first time they even step foot in a bank. So the financial literacy aspect of this is great. And then on top of that, there's additional components where we could leverage other programs. Like, for example, there's a lot of college preparedness programs, there's a lot of other programs, but if someone who graduated at a particular high school wants to give back to their neighborhood, and they're a very successful doctor or movie star, and instead of creating a whole nother fund, they could basically say, for everybody who went to my Dayton Heights Elementary School, and you get an A, I'll give you $20 towards your college savings account. So it's an opportunity for other philanthropy or other aspects to come in, including financial literacy, saying that in the 11th grade, in order to draw this down, you must take a financial literacy or scholarship course. And on top of that, we'll give you $20 to contribute towards the account. So we would have to figure out which portions is your money and which portions is part of this program that you can't touch. And obviously, if you move out of state, then you could take your money that you invested with your parents or your grandparents or anything else like that. But the money that was given by the government, you can't take that with you.
Just another couple of questions, Mr. Chairman. Why does the automatic enrollment program start in the first grade? Why not kindergarten, when kids are?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we worked with LAUSD to come up with that solution of first grade. And based on the data that we were presented with from LAUSD, there is a lot of student mobility in kindergarten, and so families are either not enrolling in kindergarten because I believe it's not required in the state of California. To go to kindergarten. And so what we worked with the district and saw that there is so much mobility between schools, and that once students start first grade, that their enrollment is a little bit more stable and they're not switching schools quite as often, something that just from my experience of running a program, this creates an opportunity to start talking about that program at kindergarten graduation. So to let parents know, I went to, I think, 36 kindergarten graduations in my first year running our program, and to be able to present at kindergarten graduation, which parents go to because it's an exciting thing and there's balloons and their kids being celebrated, is to say, get ready. The CSA program is launching next year. You're going to get more information about it. So those conversations can start earlier in getting families ready for that account. But the first grade, when we worked with the district, that was their recommendation based on student mobility.
And then finally, you say here that HCID is going to select the schools to participate each year as opposed to, I guess, some other kind of process. Well, why is that better, and what does that mean? What does that mean for my district, for example? How do we get the schools, how are schools going to be determined, identified?
That's a great question. So there is some discussion of this in the report. I want to find the right page number to direct you to. So on page 13, under program implementation, there's a paragraph about school selection. So we've been working with the district and the county to really accomplish two major goals for this school selection process. The first of which is prioritizing high-need students, and the second of which is geographic consideration for the city. So making sure that all city, county, and board offices have schools in each year of the rollout, and making sure that the district is prioritizing our high-need students in the first year, with the knowledge that every year more and more schools will be included, and then obviously from year 5 onward it will be an LAUSD-wide initiative. So that piece is still in development, but there is a little bit more information in this report and in subsequent reports. Councilmember Rue's office worked with USC to design an initial school selection process that focused on a number of demographic criteria as well as that geographic consideration. And then subsequently, Veronica, myself, others in the collaborative at the county and LAUSD have worked on including a couple new pieces of data. So families that are eligible for CalFresh, as well as using LAUSD's Student Equity Needs Index to identify those high needs schools. But so it will be both
So how soon will that list be available? When will we be able to
Yeah.
review your list?
Hopefully next school year.
Yeah, the fall.
Yeah, we will, HSID will share updates as they become available, but know that this is a high priority topic for, of course, the city, county, and LAUSD. But yes, we're hoping that all school, that,
So the first cohort will be in September?
Fall of 2020.
And luckily, it's because of the state funding and commitment from our city council that's able to do that. And I just want to quickly state, when we first presented it to LAUSD, and I was having a conversation with Superintendent Austin Buettner, he wanted 100% immediately. He wanted all first graders. Actually, I wanted that too. But after talking with the professionals and seeing all these different programs, while Children's Savings Account is not new, it is proven, and it is there's several programs throughout the state and in the nation. We will be the largest school district in the nation to have this. And our program will pretty much dwarf all other programs. So we wanted to make sure that we rolled it out in a phased approach. And we wanted to make sure it's done right, and it's about building up the capacity, working out any problems that might occur. So unfortunately, we're going to start with the 10%. But trust me, we really wanted to do. Austin Buettner was like, let's do everybody at once, and that was just a logistical nightmare. So.
yeah.
That's all I have. This is an exciting program. I'm happy to support it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've always been a big supporter of children's savings accounts. I think it's an enormous step in the right direction. I appreciate everyone's work on this. And yeah, considering that there are 600,000+ students in the LAUSD system, it's important to scale it up appropriately and learn best practices along the way. I understand that. And this wouldn't exclude necessarily philanthropy getting involved and perhaps sponsoring an entire first grade at a school. So we have to keep that in mind as well. And that might be something that the world of philanthropy in Los Angeles might be interested in pursuing. So I think this is just terrific. And just some of my questions, can you expand a little bit more about the residency issue? Meaning the child goes to school in first grade and maybe leaves in fourth grade and never comes back to California. Could they then use what money was accrued while they were here at LAUSD in the city of Los Angeles? Could they then come back and go to school in California and utilize that fund for a state college, private or public?
Yes to both. So yes to private or public college. So as the council member mentioned, we want to make using this money as flexible as possible. So that includes all types of accredited institutions as well as a variety of uses beyond just tuition and fees. And so to your question of if students leave and can they come back, the shorter answer is we know that they will leave and come back, right? LAUSD has extremely high student mobility, and so we know that students are coming in and out of the district. And so every program across the country has handled this question differently, but for most kids, whatever they have, for most programs, what they have accrued in their time while they were a student of LAUSD, that's what they would be eligible to use. And of course, at any time, a family would be able to request their own funds back, just like they would be able to do a withdrawal from a savings account that would be held in their name.
And as far as other requirements, would they need to go to a California institution? No, they could go to any school anywhere.
Correct.
All right. And then what would the city's sort of ongoing costs be? Would it simply be staff time, or is that an occasion for a future discussion in terms of general revenue funding? What have you envisioned through this analysis as possible future ongoing funding so this program becomes a legacy program?
Yes. So one intent is to continue to apply for additional funding through the California Student Aid Commission. As Erin had mentioned, they will be releasing a proposal. And then we have allocated community development block grant for the staffing. And so we would hope to maybe do the same.
Okay.
So just one point of clarification. So last year, Governor Newsom appropriated $3 million for support. This year, that was expanded to a $25 million pot of funds. So that's a significant increase. And so one of the instructions in this report is HSID requesting authority to apply for part of that $25 million. So obviously, HSID intends to apply for the maximum amount of funds. Last time we spoke with the California Student Aid Commission, their plan is to release that grant application in January of 2020. So the criteria have not been released, but last grant, it was a 3-year grant cycle, and so the hope is that they would use that exact same criteria, and that it would be able to fund the seed deposits and potentially other program costs through the first 5 years of the program. And so I spoke to Abigail Marquez this morning. The idea is, of course, to exhaust all grant and private philanthropy options before thinking about a general revenue fund request.
Okay. And let's talk a bit about the non-traditional family structure and where that fits into the scenario. Some kids are foster kids. Some children never, ever get adoptive parents, but they go through the public school system. So how would someone basically designated as a guardian, how would all of that work?
Yeah.
So the city, or HSED, would be the custodian of the account, and then each student has a unique identifier. It's their school ID number, and that doesn't change. It follows them through all grade levels. So if they were a first grader and they were in foster care, they would still have the unique ID number. If they never ended in a home, what would happen is once they turned 18 and were going off to college and wanted to draw down, they would be able to.
Okay.
Yeah, we actually worked with a number of experts in DCFS in a number of cities, including San Francisco and St. Louis, to address that change in guardianship question specifically. And that's one of the reasons why this account is always tied to the student as the beneficiary. The parent or guardian do not ever at any point own these accounts for exactly that purpose. And so that unique identifier that Veronica mentioned is key. And the other thing is the critical nature of the partnership with LAUSD, and so communication is in all cases going, or as many cases as possible, going directly to the student through the district rather than through the mail. So if address changes, if guardianship changes, that information about the program is going home in the backpack and going to wherever that child may be going home and whatever adults are there to receive that information. So that's been a key part of this design process, so thank you.
Thank you. And so far, baked into this, there are many things that are so great about this program, but one is regardless of immigration status, right, that's baked in, and also it is focused solely on enrollment at LAUSD public schools, not charter schools. Nothing against charters, but that conversation is going to come up. But the focus is public schools.
Yes, so it's public school or any affiliate of LAUSD. So if a charter is an affiliate of LAUSD, they could qualify as well.
All right.
Correct. And then we've actually worked with LAUSD board member Nick Melvoin's office that has had some interest in independent charter schools. And what the collaborative's perspective has been, there are two barriers to enrolling independent charter schools at this point. One is data access, right? So LAUSD has the rosters for all district and district affiliated charter schools, but they do not have that access to independent charter schools. So that data sharing piece would need to be worked out, as well as funding. So we can clearly make a public benefits case for use of public funds. That case is less sound when we're dealing with independent charter schools. But if philanthropy were able and had an interest in funding that, there's no reason that schools couldn't be added down the line. We just want to make sure that we're committing to LAUSD students first.
Okay, and so that 40,000 plus number encompasses all of LAUSD schools and affiliates.
Correct.
And then lastly, what was it? It went right out of my head. It'll come back to me. Let's move on. It'll come back.
Thank you. And, I just wanted to add, when you brought about philanthropy, yes, we hope to make some announcements later. There's a lot of interest in a lot of our philanthropic partners who are very excited about this program as well. And this is not a new idea. This is something even our own Mayor Eric Garcetti, when he was a council member, was working on this as well. So we're very excited about that. And I just want to really point out, again, on page 14, if you look at the projected cost of each year, and then the staff cost, which is about $330,000 a year. On year 5, when we're fully funded, we're looking at about $2.4 million, which again, if this fund, if we raise, because remember that the $50 accrues for 12 years. If we get to about $40 million, $2 million a year times 12 is 24. If we could raise another $16 million at $40 million with about a 6% return, we're talking $2.4 million that could fund both the administrative and the first grade accounts. So this is a very exciting program on that.
I thought of my question.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. So the city has a very clear legislative process moving forward. Would there also have to be a dual process through LAUSD to settle perhaps remaining questions and, politics on that board, et cetera, et cetera? And where would the two merge, and is there a set timeline, and do you have a commitment from the LAUSD board to move in concert with the city?
Yes, that's a great question. So Councilmember Rue's office has been working with elected offices that he mentioned at the start of his remarks. And so we're working right now with the county, with Supervisor Markedly Thomas's office. Emily Williams is here from his staff. And so there will be a counterpart motion for a county report back later this month, I believe, and we're working with LAUSD board to introduce a board action report. So they have introduced previous resolutions that will essentially instruct their relevant staff to continue on the development. So the next step would be to work on that MOA piece that I mentioned. So that would involve bringing in all the elected officials as well as relevant counsel from the departments and working out those data sharing pieces. But yes, they're committed and excited, and you'll be hearing more from them in the coming weeks.
Terrific, thanks. Great work.
And just to comment on that, have we been working on this for 2 years now? I can't.
More than
Was it
that.
3? Time
There's
just
the timeline-
flies.
There's the timeline somewhere in this report. I believe, oh yes, there's a timeline on page 11. Your first motion, council member, was in June of 2016.
Oh, my God.
So that's when it officially
Yeah.
came to council, so I'd imagine you were working on it long before that.
And just to let you know, LAUSD is very excited and committed to this. That this actually got instituted and started with Zimmer, President Zimmer. And when he left office, Nick Melvoin and all the rest of the board were still fully embracing, because this only helps their own mission.
That's great, but there's politics between charters and traditional
Yeah,
schools.
yeah. So,
That has to be dealt with, and I'm sure it will, especially if everyone supports it enough, but that is a reality. But I don't think that's something that we can't get past.
yeah.
Yeah.
So to get this started, I wanted just to quickly run through the recommendations.
Yes, great.
In front of you. So the department is seeking, as Aaron had mentioned, we applied for a grant for $286,583. So one of the recommendation is that we accept the grant from the California Student Aid Commission under the Every Kids Count program for the development and implementation of the Los Angeles Children's Savings Account program. And then the second is that with the assistance of the CLA and the CAO's office, prepare and submit applications for additional funding from the California Student Aid Commission for the development and implementation of the Savings Account program. And that's what Aaron alluded to. Governor Newsom is going to appropriate $25 million, and so we want to make sure we get our applications in to support this. And the third recommendation is that we prepare and release, or approval to prepare and release the RFP. You have it in attachment A, subject to the city attorney review as to the form, to select a financial institution that will manage the deposits made related to the CSA program, and to also select a technology provider that will build the data platform for families to access their account information online. And then the fourth is a report back on the RFP results and recommendations to the mayor and city council for the selection of the subject contractor, and request authority to execute contract with the selected contractor subject to the availability of funding for a contract term to begin on or about May of 2020, with the option to renew for up to 2 additional one-year contract terms. And this is contingent upon the availability of funds and satisfactory contractor performance. And then the fifth recommendation is authority to work with the County of Los Angeles and Los Angeles Unified School District to draft a memorandum of agreement that outlines the roles and responsibilities of each jurisdiction, as well as cost-sharing agreement with the assistance of the city attorney. The final memorandum of agreement will be reviewed and approved by the mayor and city council. And the planning for this program has been a collaborative effort with the city, county, and LAUSD. The next steps in this process will be to formalize that agreement and draft the MOA that outlines the roles and responsibilities, as well as the cost-sharing agreement. HCID will work with the city attorney's office as well as other relevant counsel at the county and LAUSD and present the MOA to the mayor and council for approval. And then we are also requesting authority to establish a new account for 3S872, the Children's Savings Account within the HCID LA Small Grants and Awards Fund, number 49N. And this authorizes the controller to deposit grants and awards received from the California Student Aid Commission and other resources that are intended for the Los Angeles Children's Savings Account program into HSID's Small Grants and Award Fund. And then authorize HSID General Manager or the designee to prepare controller instructions and make any necessary technical adjustments consistent with the mayor and city council action on this matter, subject to the approval of the CAO, and instruct the controller to implement the instructions. And finally, this authorizes HSID and the controller to make the necessary adjustments and implement the instructions.
So thank you for that. And I appreciate that. And we are going to actually note and file the HSID's recommendation, but we're going to be approving the CAO's report. And I'm going to make an amendment to that, which is pretty much mirror imaging what HSID, which is just talked about. But I need to read it into the record. So if the CAO could come up, and if you could read. I apologize to my colleagues, but if you could read the recommendations from the CAO, which we're going to be adopting.
Okay, sure. Good afternoon, Emily Zen Cervantes from the Office of the City Administrative Officer. So our report concurs with HSID's report and recommendations, but we amended it to reflect HSID's intentions and to meet city requirements, as well as add additional recommendations that will allow HSID to continue to develop and implement the program with council approval. So I'm going to read those recommendations into the record. So our recommendations are that the council, subject to the approval of the mayor, 1, find that a Los Angeles Children's Savings Account program that provides seed funding for bank accounts opens for eligible Los Angeles Unified School District's children for the purpose of funding post-secondary education and pre-college expenses is a public benefit. 2, find that a proposed Los Angeles CSA program similar to the one outlined in the Housing Community Investment Department's transmittal dated October 4th, 2019, yet addresses concerns raised in this report, or CAO report, is the appropriate structure for the Los Angeles CSA program identified in recommendation 1 above. 3, find that a school selection plan that focuses on high-need students in the first year of the proposed CSA program, yet includes equitable geographic representation of the City of Los Angeles, County of Los Angeles, and LAUSD, meets the public benefit identified in recommendation 1 above. 4, authorize the HSID General Manager or designee to A, accept $286,583 in grant funding from the California Student Aid Commission under the Every Kid Counts grant program for the development and implementation of the proposed Los Angeles CSA program. B, negotiate and execute a grant agreement with the CSAC in substantial conformance with the grant agreement attached to the CAO report, subject to the approval of the city attorney as to form and legality. C, prepare and submit applications for additional grant funding from the CSAC for the development and implementation of the proposed LACSA program with the assistance of the Chief Legislative Analyst as needed. D, prepare and release a request for proposals or RFP in substantial conformance with attachment A to HSID's transmittal, subject to the city attorney review as to form and legality, to select a financial institution that will manage deposits made related to the proposed LACSA program, and to also select a technology provider that will build a data platform for families to access their account information online. And E, prepare controller instructions and make any necessary technical adjustments consistent with the mayor and city council action on this matter, subject to the approval of the city administrative officer. 5, instruct HSID to report back to the mayor and council on A, the RFP results and recommendations to the mayor and council for the selection of the financial institution and technology provider, and request authorization to execute a contract or contracts with the selected contractor or contractors for a contract term of 1 year from May 1st, 2020 through April 30th, 2021, with an option to renew for up to 2 additional 1-year terms, subject to the availability of funding, completion of the Charter Section 1022 determination process, compliance with the city's contracting requirements, satisfactory contractor performance, need, and approval of the city attorney as to form and legality. B, any subsequent grants or donations from outside entities for the purpose of implementing the proposed LACSA program, and request authority from the mayor and council to accept, deposit, appropriate, and expend the funds. C, a proposed incentive structure after it has been developed, along with estimated fiscal impact and potential funding sources. And D, a request to release a separate RFP for the evaluation of the proposed LACSA program that will complete an analysis of program implementation within a year after the first year of deposits into student accounts, as well as ongoing evaluation of subsequent years. And E, proposed policies and procedures in the event the city is unable to fund the program with outside funding or the general fund in any future given year. 6, instruct HSID with the assistance of the City Attorney's Office to work with the County of Los Angeles and LAUSD to draft a Memorandum of Agreement, or MOA, that outlines the roles and responsibilities of each jurisdiction, a cost-sharing agreement, and terms for when a jurisdiction is unable to appropriate funds for the program in any given year, and report back to request Mayor and Council approval of the MOA, subject to the review and approval of the City Attorney as to form. 7, authorize the controller to A, establish a new account, 43S872, Children's Savings Account, within the HCLA Small Grants and Awards Fund number 49N-43. B, deposit grants and awards received from the California Student Aid Commission intended for the proposed LACSA program into the HCLA Small Grants and Awards Fund number 49N-43. C, appropriate funds into account 43S872, Children's Savings Account within fund number 49N43 upon receipt of the California Student Aid Commission grants and awards. And D, transfer funding within the Housing and Community Investment Department number 43, Community Development Trust Fund number 424 as follows to provide funding for the administration and oversight of a proposed LACSA program. So from Fund number 424, account 43S872, Children's Savings Account, an amount of $164,587 to Fund 424, 43S143, Housing Community Investment Department, an amount of $108,553, and into Fund 424, account 43S299, Reimbursement Job Fund costs, in the amount of $56,034. And finally, increase appropriations in the amount of $94,394 in fund number 143, account number 1010 for salaries general account, and $14,159 into the general fund account 630 leasing account. And that's it.
Great, thank you. Any questions, colleagues? No?
Could you repeat one more time? Both.
So, like I said, I do have one quick amendment, because I do want to make sure that we get a good number of proposals in response to these RFPs, and I have some concerns about the proposed contract length, so I'm going to recommend that we amend recommendation 5A of the CAO's report to read, the RFP results and recommendations to the mayor and council for the selection of the financial institutions and technology provider, and requested authorization to execute a contract with the selected contractors for a contract term of 2 years, from May 1st, 2020 to April 30th, 22, with an option to renew for up to 3 additional one-year terms, subject to the availability of funding, completion of the Charter Section 1022 determination process, compliance with the city's contracting requirements, satisfactory contractor performance, need and approval of the city attorney as to form and legality. Colleagues, any objections to the amendment and the recommendations? Seeing none, I'd like to approve the CAO's CAO's report as amended, as I just amended, and 2, note and file HSID's October 4th, 2019 report, and note and file HSID's May 17, 2018 report on the same council file. Actually, we can't take that vote yet because we have one public comment, right? So if we could get the one public comment. So we have Wayne. You got a minute?
So yes, I want a special amendment to this, and I agree with current Price talking about the 1144 account recently. I think Brotherhood Bank should be the provider of this account. Brotherhood Bank stands for the African American community and everybody who wants to take a chance on people who are disadvantaged. They have given mortgages to Herb Wesson and Current Price, even with a bankruptcy they did that. Imagine that in a failed business. I just think that's fine. So Brotherhood Bank is the way to go. Also, what happened if these people got no immigration papers and no social security number? How are they going to reply to the tax man when they can't get an I-10 number? Well, it doesn't matter. I also say, fuck Mayor Garcetti, and let's get this money stolen as fast as possible from Sacramento. Thank you so much.
So colleagues, going back to the recommendation, so I have to read it over again, or is that it? Yeah, no, so colleagues, if there's no objections, I'd like to move this along, and that will be the order. So thank you so very much for this. And I do want to call out in the audience, we have Emily Williams from Mark Lee Thomas's office, who's been very instrumental and helpful. And I'd like to thank my team for coming a long way. This is, like I said, 3-4 years in the making. My entire team worked hard, but I do want to give a special shout out to my policy director, Justin Orenstein, who was the genesis of this project. It's not over yet, a long way to go still, but I really want to thank my staff and thank Justin for bringing us here. And Mr. Clerk, I understand we have a placeholder for this item on the council's November 6th agenda?
Yes, sir.
Great. Thank you, and that is it. There's no business before us, so this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, members.